Welcome to another episode of ClearPoint Unlock. Today we're going to be talking about AI and software engineering, something that's dear to our hearts. I'm Rob Cleghorn, CTO of ClearPoint. I have with me David Corbett, one of our practice directors. So heaps going on in the world of software and AI.
Absolutely, yeah.
Quite keen to have a chat about some of the things we're seeing. I guess we're the first guinea pigs on the world of disruption, software being massively disrupted in the way we build it, and we're going to talk about some of that today.
There's massive disruption, but there's also opportunity in that as well. So yeah, it'd be cool to see how AI is changing the way that things are happening, not necessarily just displacing as well.
Yeah, we've been following it quite closely over the last couple of years, and I guess we saw some pretty big changes towards the end of last year when the models just got that much better, but the tooling that goes with the models.
Yeah. So I think those November, December foundational models, the LLMs coming out then, actually really empowered or enabled the agentic workflows, the ones where you can be a little less hands-on and more kind of directional and guiding in achieving your outcomes that you're after. And then since then, I think we've seen like two more kind of generations of models since then, and that's just only a few months ago, right? Like things are happening really, really rapidly and getting a lot better. So these models are able to achieve a lot more with good inputs and good direction, like being a key part of it. And we can dive into that a bit more, but really, be more capable of working through a workflow and achieving an end outcome that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's interesting that, and we were just chatting before about the January models versus the February models, and if you're still using January models, you're kind of slipping behind. Here we are in March.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about how bad the February models are soon. It's just moving so quickly, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you wouldn't think of using a Gemini 2.5 model now. Like that's just ancient and not great. So why would you be stuck on that? But there are some earlier AI adopters that might be actually stuck with those older models that they've got embedded into their products and different things. Might be okay in achieving some outcomes, but definitely, keeping up and keeping pace with how things are moving is a key part of being in this industry now as well.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like trying not to pour the cement too early on the decisions you make on which tools to use. It's just moving so quickly that the last thing you want to do is get locked in, because you just have to unlock that pretty quickly and move on to the better thing, which is, who knows what's coming around the corner in a few weeks' time. Yeah,
and just on that, it's not about waiting for the next thing to come out and I'll invest and I'll think about using that then. No, you get stuck in right now, use the tools that are there, but you need to be flexible and be able to pivot and move and change things as new things come out every month.
Yeah, hopefully it's not like the old days of choosing a cloud vendor. We need to choose one and let's go with it and back it. It feels a bit more, there's so many different things, so many tools, so many decisions to make. Like you say, get amongst it, try it out, see what's working for you and learn. Learn as an individual, learn as a team, learn as a company. How to get software. Yeah,
and that's the key thing, right? Curiosity has been great for innovation in our industry, and that curious mindset, that developing, new features, new ways of doing things, new ways of building software has just been a key part of this. AI is just the next level of innovation within our industry, but it's those engineers with real curiosity that are going to come out and be the ones who are amongst it, be the ones who are continuing to drive the trend and remain at the forefront of what's going on. So yeah, really you do need to invest in yourself in that curious mindset and just be agile and thinking about, well, what am I using now? Does AI help me also to learn and to grow? And can I use AI to think about, well, how I might adapt? So the decision making when it comes to choosing frameworks or whatever else, the friction is becoming less and less as we're able to use these AI tools to help us to move from one thing to the next as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of those people who have really adopted that change mindset and leaning into it is Steve Yigi. He's obviously one of the leaders in our world, one of the industry guys that when he talks, most people listen and hear what he has to say.
Yeah.
And he did a really nice thing last year, I guess. He's obviously in the tools and he's writing lots of books on vibing and the transformation, and he's sharing it really well as he's going through it himself. But he did a really nice way of sort of laying out the stages, the 8 stages of adoption, I guess, if you like. And I thought maybe we could just go through those quickly and talk about where people are, because you sort of look at it and think, oh yeah, I'm pretty well advanced, and then you see, actually I'm only at stage 4 or stage 5, and what's next, and what are others doing?
Absolutely.
And it's not necessarily mean that this is going to be the future, but it's a good point in time where we are today and what's working well and what's not and going forward.
I mean, there's 8 stages now. Who knows? There might be 10 stages next month.
Yeah, a couple that we don't know about yet.
Yeah,
it's interesting. So starting with the start, I guess is where we all started maybe a year or two ago. Some people might be there now. Is about mostly writing code manually and tabbing through and getting suggestions and accepting those suggestions and being very much over the code.
Yeah, no, I was talking to a person over the weekend actually who was kind of like, I really like writing code. But when I asked the question, well, do you like writing code or do you like solving problems? He was like, took a moment to think about it, and he's like, well, actually there's aspects of it that actually I just like solving problems, not necessarily typing and, writing code itself. There are some things that are nice about handcrafting things, but the reality came down to, well, perhaps if I can solve problems but in a different way, that will satisfy my engineering brain and want to achieve the outcomes that I want to.
Yeah, you still get to think about the patterns that you want to use and the architecture and the approaches, right? And it's not just about asking a very generic question and expecting a good answer, because it is about thinking about exactly how you want it to work, and the more you can give it a clarity on that, then the better the outcomes.
Yeah.
So moving from stage 1 to stage 2, which is agent in the IDE, so some sort of sidebar agents which are doing some things, making some suggestions and adding a few little snippets that you can see.
And I think this is where we've seen actually engineers slow down a bit as well, rather than going, AI is making me more productive. In this kind of stage, I think it's added a bit of friction in there as they have to approve all the tool calls, they have to kind of review all the lines of code that are being generated, and they go, I could do this faster if I did it, myself. Well, some things yes, other things no, but yeah.
And then it moves on to agent in the IDE YOLO mode. You only live once. So you trust an agent enough to turn off permissions. You let it create files, run terminal commands without stopping on every check, but you're still sort of keeping an eye on what it's doing.
Yeah. And we've seen some spectacular things go wrong here as well, right? With people deleting production databases and all those kinds of things. They've used YOLO mode, but not in the way that perhaps they could get the outcomes that they're after, with still some safeguards or guardrails in place. That means, like, hey, it doesn't have access to production data. It's got access to your local development environment. All those kind of development and engineering practices that we've built up over time that we know are good for engineers are also turns out to be good for AI engineering as well.
Yeah, imagine that. You put in a whole lot of junior engineers into your organisation and you keep them safe from practices. So I guess that doesn't change, and certainly a lot to talk about in that space. But I think it's interesting to see how fast that's evolving and how there's still people who are wanting to be on the code. And what do you think it's going to take to actually, because I feel it's inevitable that we're not going to be writing code soon. Probably this year, for most of us, that 100% of code will be AI generated in your apps, projects, in your software.
Yeah. We're already seeing some places, Anthropic with Claude code being 100% written by AI. I think the codex stat was 80 to 90%, something like that. So it's already happening.
What do you think the thing is holding people back in terms of not accepting that or still wanting to write the code? What is it that's stopping them from going, actually, let go of the stage?
Yeah, some of it I think is about perfection, wanting to make sure that, that's not the way I would write it. And when you think about it doesn't matter the style or the things that actually have never mattered, typically when it comes to style or preference. But if you can get the outcome that you're after, do those things even matter? Sometimes there's a bit of bloat or, those kinds of things. But as we said, the models are getting better and better all the time, and that's becoming less of a problem, less slop around.
I think that's really important. People choose their opinions on it from models that are not, January models. They're from maybe last year or even mid-last year where, they weren't as good as they are today. And I think you've just got to be careful on, forming a strong opinion on whether it's good or not until you're actually using the latest and really living and breathing it.
Absolutely, and be prepared to change those opinions, right, really rapidly, loosely hold them, continually evaluate, continually be curious and learn.
And then we get into CLI. So we're stepping away from the IDE and we're actually using the CLI tooling. And that was actually quite a big change for me. The IDE is such a happy place, a place where you understand how it all works. You really know the different views you can get. You've got a really good context of everything that's happening. And all of a sudden you're just in a command line going, what's my role here? I can't even see what's happening.
Yeah. So talk to me a bit more about that. Like, what is the main difference there, and how do you make that transition from I work in an IDE to I work in a command line, and I'm not reviewing all the files that are changed?
Yeah, well, I guess for me, it's probably about having confidence in the setup and the structure before you start doing that, having confidence in the architecture and that you've set up well and explained well exactly how things fit, and you've got some good rules around all of that, so you know that when it does go off and create some things, it's within the context of your project, your folder structure, the different patterns that you use, the naming conventions, so that when you do go back and have a look at it later, you don't go, oh, this is all weird, this is not what I had. It's actually, that's in the right folder, that's got the right name, that's got the things, it's using the same architecture, it's copying the patterns that are in there already.
Yeah, and it's like you're still looking at the code, right? Like, you're not totally abandoning that, but it's not looking at it in the IDE. Perhaps you're in GitHub or reviewing a set of changes that's already been done. And I think one of the key principles there is still trying to keep those units of work quite small, scoped, and well defined, so that you've got small logical units of work that you're looking at, able to review it well, and then ship those. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because as we're sort of getting on now to stage 6, which is the multi-agent parallelism, running multiple instances, 3 to 5, you're still across them. You're still one human managing the multiple agents. And I think a lot of us are getting to here at the moment and finding that next step a bit harder, which we'll talk about shortly. But I guess in this multi-agent view, it's actually quite mentally demanding. Trying to manage 3 to 5 agents all day, and they're getting through the code at a ridiculous amount of rate of knots. And at some point, there comes a point in time where you have to do less reviewing. We're seeing this sort of globally. We've got a lot of open source projects shutting down contributions. They've just got 20 years of reviewing. No one wants that. So it's a really interesting internal discussion we're having. At what point, what needs to be true for us to look at the code less or review less code, or have a bit more confidence in the agents that the code that's being created is actually good enough that we don't need to go and review every line and make sure it's all perfect, because that's the bottleneck now.
Yeah. And I think a lot of this comes back to high quality inputs, right? Like, if you spend a lot more time crafting your prompts and producing specifications or, PRDs, product requirements documents, if you spend your time there and iterating on those and getting those right, you can do that with AI as well, rubber duck with them, or even get the AI to do most of the writing of these things with some guidance and direction, get the AI to go off and do some parallel research and to produce these specifications that are really high quality. Spend a lot of time on that. Then by the time you get to actually generating the code, the inputs are such high quality that your outputs are much higher quality as well.
Yeah.
But as with everything, instead of taking just a large or broad scope to things, it's just narrowing it down, be much more specific, smaller changes, thinking about agents that do reviews. For example, why just have one agent do a review? Could you have another agent from a different model family that has been trained differently? Can that review your code from a security perspective, just that one perspective, versus someone else, another agent being able to review from a coding standards or from these other different perspectives? And then you can think about, okay, so it's not just one agent that's doing something. You're breaking it up. You're much more specialized, but you've got teams of agents then. And this is kind of like what you come down to in the stage 7, where you've gone from that kind of 3 to 5 agents to, okay, now I'm managing maybe 12 agents. And that starts to get a bit unwieldy at the kind of your upper limits of being able to manually orchestrate things. And then you need to start thinking about orchestration frameworks for managing your teams of agents.
Yeah, we'll get into those in a minute. But it's interesting that when you talk about specs, there's, I wonder if we've got a little bit sloppy with specs in terms of the way Scrum and Agile has moved conversations over documentation and things like that. If you think it's easy to write a spec for AI, then you haven't written one that can fully get what you want all the way through to build, tested, and have the output exactly as you wanted it without any human intervention on the way through. Now, that's quite different from conversations over your documentation, Agile manifesto, right, where you just, don't worry too much about it. We'll have a conversation with the developer. we'll slow them down and we'll work through exactly what it means. And I think that's a big transition in terms of almost going backwards a little bit in terms of the agile movement, but also once you get that right, you've got everything you need to move fast, and focusing on getting that right, like you say, well documented.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, engineers, we kind of want to keep moving forward, right? Like, okay, I've got my spec done, let's just go. And that might be right. But even if you generate some code and you get to the end of it and you go, actually, it's not quite the right thing, do you just change it, or do you go back and reevaluate, well, in my process here, what could I do better on my input side to get the outcome that I want? So could I actually just experiment and throw away all that code and iterate on my prompting, iterate on my specs and requirements so that I can get closer to that one shot? And then I'm learning this loop as well as the AI, being able to produce better quality outcomes so that going forward, I've got much higher quality inputs. Are we spending time on that, or are we just going, I didn't quite do what I wanted it to, I'll have to fix it up, that's my responsibility? Mm-hmm. Well, hang on, let's go back and actually understand how the tools are hallucinating. Where they hallucinate, you can kind of go, well, perhaps we should implement a tool call or something here that implements that hallucination, that guides it back onto the right path. Those kinds of things are really key and valuable for getting faster and higher output.
Yeah, well, that's a really good transition to start talking about the next stage 7, which is the manual orchestration of managing 10 agents. You're starting to push the limits of what you can do on your own.
Yeah.
You're starting to feel exhausted and fatigued because you're cognitively switching between lots of different features throughout the day and trying to work out what it's just done and what it needs help on next, and what's the next thing to do, and it's really quite loaded up in your mind. There's lots of AI fatigue, people spending a lot of time in this space, and it's hard to stop because you're getting so much done. You're like, I'll just do another hour and I'll get through all of these. And for what we're used to, that's a massive amount of throughput.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now, I've caught myself out quite a few times, quite late and early in the morning maybe. I just go, I need to stop. I'm getting through the code, but I just need to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in that place as well. I was like, I've spent a couple of hours generating some code, and now I've got 30 PRs that I have to review and go back and make sure that they're in the right state and work on those, right? So there's a fair amount of, sometimes instead of sitting there and waiting and watching an agent do something, it's like, cool, it can go off and it can do its thing. I can work on the next thing with another agent. So this is where that manual orchestration kind of gets to. There's a bit of inefficiency in that overall. Context switching is really expensive, and coming back into that. Once you get into that flow state, though, as an engineer, and if you're managing 2 or 3 different kind of streams of work and you've got multiple agents doing this, can feel pretty powerful, but as you say, extremely exhausting at the same time. But it's not about just writing code, right? There's a massive part to this software development lifecycle at the beginning bit, making sure you're getting the specs right. At the other side, actually shipping code, getting it into production, getting it into users' hands where it's actually adding value at that point in time. And then the whole monitoring and understanding, the telemetry and is it actually doing what we expected it to do? Is it working in the way, are users actually able to use and, to achieve what they are trying to achieve, and that feedback loop feeding back into.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the things I feel is quite often not in the conversation enough. We talk a lot about, it's defining the architecture and the patterns that you want to use, but not so much about the infrastructure. And there's so many ways of skinning the cat with infrastructure. You look at the cloud vendors and what they offer, and they often shove you down a path of things that may be a little bit bloated or not necessarily needed. Doesn't help with scale as much as they say. And the AI will just read all that and just off the internet and go, this is the way forward, because it's trained on those models. And so I'm finding that being a bit more prescriptive on exactly the solution and the infrastructure that you want to use and how it's going to work, and defining that clearly gets much better outcomes, other than just go off and start building a whole lot of stuff that I actually don't even know how much that's going to cost me after a few weeks of running it in production.
And if you're working on a niche product, which you can now, right, you can have much more niche products that are really specific in what they're tailored towards. Do you need something that scales to millions of users? Probably not. So do you need to think about this a bit differently? If you don't know you've got a business yet, what's the point in thinking about scale? That still holds true. And with AI, you can iterate on that, and you can scale as you need to, but you don't need a full Kubernetes cluster to be able to just run an app that your mum and dad are going to do their finances on, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it depends who your mum and dad are, I guess.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
But I guess that leads us to stage 8. I know you're desperate to talk about this one because you've been deep in it for a few months now, using orchestration systems, and I guess the Gastown is a pretty cool, very new approach to that. I'd love to hear more about that and what that's meant in terms of the hands-off that you get to, and how are you still getting tired and exhausted, or is it actually really hands-off and bugs getting through? How does it all feel?
Yeah, so this stage 8, it's defined as an orchestration builder, not just an orchestration user. Part of that is, yes, there are frameworks starting to pop up like Gastown where you can use them. But then, the next bit above that is actually extending these things or customizing them and building your own parts to the workflows that you're trying to solve. Not every single software development workflow is going to be the same. Depends on what you're after. So, for me, yes, I've been using Gastown, but I've been writing plugins for this and got, some really specific agents that I'm plugging in at different levels. I'm spending more of my time in GitHub defining issues that a product manager agent can pick up and iterate on and generate product requirements and, go through the same kind of review cycles. So, if I'm writing those with Claude Opus, then Gemini can be reviewing them. And sometimes these agents will go through 7, 8, 9, 10 rounds of review and actually get to a really high quality output.
I think lots of engineers might argue there's never been enough in that review phase of those documents, right? Because it lands with them and they're like, what is this? I can't implement that. How do you expect this to work? And not really thought out enough.
Yeah.
So do those agents, do they look at the code as well and try and work out how to implement it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when they're creating this product requirement spec, the product manager agent has the context of the code base that it's working within, so it can do some research against that. It also can spin off some research agents to look at, what is best practice, and you could define what those types of organizations and how they do things, or those other products that are similar to achieving kinds of results that you're looking for from a UX perspective, from a scale or whatever perspective. So you can define all those kinds of things in your product manager agent kind of spec or definition, and they can review. And Gemini, I found, is really good at reviewing other people's code, other agents' code. I think what's really key in this is that the models like Anthropic's Claude Opus and Sonnet and things are really good. Even, Codex are really good at writing code. Gemini's got a really good world model. So it understands lots of things about the world, and Google has access to a whole lot of data that I think elevates that in the general. So outside of just the software engineering side of things, which gives it a good perspective on, hey, have you thought about X, Y, Z?
It's almost that diversity of thought that you have from people from different cultures and different types of people.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, good to have that different perspective from an agent model family. This is, it's an interesting topic in the industry going forward. Does our viewpoint start to become really myopic because of how these agents are trained, and there only being perhaps a few of them? But yeah,
it is quite funny seeing the comments when they're back and forth and how polite they are to each other.
Sometimes polite, sometimes quite blunt and brutal, actually. But
Same as humans.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess that sort of takes us to the point where we get to that stage where we can start thinking about, should we build something? Because we know we can build anything, and we can build it quite quickly and fast and to high standards. Fast forward a bit, the question comes back to what should we build, and should we build this, and what's best for our customers and our product and our company. And I think for me, that's always been where the interesting discussion is. We always get caught up in the tech, and particularly, tech for the sake of tech sometimes. But the should we build it is where the fun is, and where we can actually really start to see some change and faster cycles, way faster cycles in terms of getting things out to market and trying things with customers.
Absolutely. So, on the one hand, it unlocks a whole lot of, possibility and potential, and even existing technology that needs to be modernized, right? Think about systems that could use that, but people are too afraid to touch it because it's not well documented or defined, or, nobody actually knows how the existing system works.
Everyone who built is dead.
Yeah, there's that. And, what's the risk? If something goes wrong, perhaps that risk is too high. But perhaps with these AI tools, it helps change that narrative, and that modernization becomes a lot more possible now, because you could reverse engineer the spec of an existing system with the help of AI. It's like documenting, hey, this is what the system actually does.
Yeah, isn't it interesting how those modernization approaches have changed a bit over the last year? We go back a year or two, and Amazon were talking about how they upgraded from Java 1 to Java this, and they're taking the code and just transforming it. But what you're actually doing is you're taking the code, you're taking all the bugs, you're taking the architecture, and you're just changing the language underneath, or the version of the language in that case. Whereas fast forward to where we are today, and some of the approaches are changing from let's spend quite a bit of time unpacking all that and getting a really high detailed spec as written, as it works now, with all those little quirks in there, and make sure that you've got everything you can into this. And this almost becomes the source code of the future, is the spec of how the business logic works in this system, or how the data works, how all that, the security patterns, the architecture, and thinking about all of those things, particularly in a business sense, and then getting a chance to rethink what's the best way forward here. It's probably not what we did 20 years ago. Pretty much guarantee it's not. There'll be some really good things in there, I'm sure, but there'll be things that you would never do again. And so making sure that you don't just copy those straight across, you actually get a chance to rethink that and then go off and generate the new thing.
Yeah, and that new thing can be like, actually, we're rebuilding the system from scratch using our new spec that we've now got, and then we still have to think about migrations, but even that's becoming easier and more possible with a lot of these AI tooling as well. But yeah, it means that those modernization programs that were fraught with risk, were inherently hard, difficult problems, are a lot more approachable now, and you can achieve things in a lot shorter timeframes than previously you could. And you could think about, hey, I'm going to rewrite this, not just iterate on what exists there at the moment, which you wouldn't have thought about 2-3 years ago, right? Like, you would avoid big rewrites unless it was absolutely necessary, because everyone knows that those things take time. You always end up with less functionality or something not quite right. But now it's a lot more possible.
Also, the cycle times are so big with those things. Some of the bigger monolithic things, it's outside the cycle time of a CTO normally, so that no one wants to take that on.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can do that in a lot reduced time, then all of a sudden it becomes a viable option to really get some gains from it. But it does come back to the should we do it just for the sake of it?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like, we are generating a lot more things that we need to now maintain and to upgrade. And hey, if you've got a few users on it and AI can help you maintain it, should we run it? What's the real total cost of running and operating those things? Might be okay, it might not be.
Still trade-offs everywhere.
Absolutely.
So as we look at these 8 stages, as a CTO, it's a very difficult place to be. We're sort of a bit of a deer in the headlights. How do we get going? We rolled out Copilot, nothing's getting faster. What are the things we can do to help CTOs think about these 8 stages and how to get going through them? I guess internally we're doing a lot of thinking and a lot of sharing knowledge and a lot of lunch and learns and trying to keep that cadence going, getting everyone thinking about it a lot.
Yep.
And I guess that's one of the approaches. But what are your thoughts on how to get through those 8 stages?
I think the gaps that are showing up are around human and processes and the way that organizations function. And sometimes we need to take a step back and rethink some of those things, right? So the size of teams, for example, where people are located, do you have everyone in the same time zone? Because now if things are moving so much faster, somebody who's a couple of hours behind, they can be like days or weeks in more traditional kind of outcomes. So the way that we think about organizational structure even has to change.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that we can do, I think, as CTOs, just to really get on this cycle, which is, like you say, the sharing and the learning and like empowering people from the bottom up. Not just giving them the tools, but actually giving people space to experiment, to learn, to play around and figure out how to use the tools, and not just a one-off thing, right? Like, it needs to be an ongoing embedded culture change that really empowers your team.
Yeah, and I think we don't talk about enough is those engineering practices we mentioned earlier, having really solid engineering practices and quality controls and being able to move fast with speed before the AI comes. Those are the companies that are really accelerating with it.
Absolutely.
The ones that are the ones that are getting caught up in some of those things that help keep us safe and allow us to move fast. The CI/CD pipelines, the observability tooling, the decoupled architecture, the things that are really that have always been good practices, and I guess in the DevOps sense, and help us move quickly. And we bring in all this code. It's going to thrive in that space and still keep you safe, or it's going to decelerate and slow down and cause bottlenecks. And we've seen plenty of stories down that path as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the acceleration and the good engineering practices are good for engineering in total, not just for human engineers, but AI engineers as well. So thinking about your good feedback loops, how you kind of iterate, how you make sure that you're getting the feedback and incorporating that into your software development lifecycle as quickly as possible, both from a human process and an AI orchestration process as well, just really helps. Yeah.
So we've kind of been looking at that internally, and I guess one of the things that we've done recently, we have lots of engineers across different clients within different constraints, looking at different models, different security postures on AI and how much they can use. But we did a survey recently of all our engineers and some pretty interesting findings on that. Do you want to talk us through some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we are finding, right, 100% adoption. All of our engineers are using AI in some level or some fashion, right? And a lot of it depends on the constraints that they have, as you mentioned, within some of our clients being more risk averse or in industries where it's much more regulated. But the good news is that everyone is on this journey and they're adopting and they're bought into using AI. We're seeing actually massive velocity increases, like 40% acceleration. Like on average, some of our top engineers in these places where they're unlocked a bit more, they're seeing 70+%. That's
the AI readiness thing, though, isn't it? Where they've actually got the safety in place and some really good practices. That's where we're seeing the unlock really happen.
Absolutely. So those engineers working with clients who are fully enabled with AI were able to accelerate 48% more than those working in environments where AI was allowed but it was restricted. Right? And that's a massive difference. If you're almost 50% more productive when you've got the tools and you're allowed to use them in the ways that are good, that also, you can take your risk and your perspectives and embed that into your AI workflows. Like, that's also part of the journey. You can get those high quality outcomes.
Yeah, and I guess there's a flavour to the results there that it's from an engineering perspective, and we're seeing things like Copilot reduce the cost of generating code but increase the cost of maintaining code because the reviewing happens more, and there's a lot of things around the looking after of code and promotion and quality and all those bugs and security concerns. All those things holistically end up, because finding a bug in production is way more expensive than finding it when you're writing it. And so the holistic approach there is really important to make sure that you've got all those practices in place so that you do get those gains, and that the code generation is just a small part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a key theme that came through our survey actually was it's beyond the code, right? So our engineers are using AI for a lot more things, doing risk assessments even on just upgrading packages. If I have to upgrade a node package, well, what's the risk in my code base? That AI can help and see what APIs are being used, okay, what's deprecated, what's not, and it can give you a risk. Hey, this is low risk for your code base. Like, okay, great. So maybe I can upgrade that. And I can do those things then much more frequently. Why do I have to wait for a weekly or a monthly or quarterly patch cycle for doing those things? Can it not be daily or even twice a day? Those kind of things, right? Like, you start to see acceleration in there, and it reduces the friction then. I don't have these massive upgrade cycles that I have to go through and the risk of those things. If I incorporate those into my daily workflows, and just as I'm writing other code, then hey, it continues to accelerate things.
Oh, it's really exciting. So yeah, well, interested to see what comes next. I think that's been a really interesting discussion, and thanks for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rob.